Hey everybody, Jim Kerr here. I'm with my guest, Dr. Elia Gourgouris. He's an author, he's a coach, he's really Dr. Happiness. I hope you guys brought your coffees. I know I did. I think Elia probably has his as well.
I got mine from the happiest place on earth, Disneyland.
it, does, it doesn't get any happier than that. So, Elia, here is the key question for today's conversation. Should happiness be our goal?
I love that question. And you know who answered that question to perfection was the great Greek philosopher Aristotle over 2,500 years ago. Here's what Aristotle said about happiness is that happiness is the meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. That doesn't get any better than that. So the answer to your question is 1,000%, not 100%, 1,000%. Yes. The meaning and purpose of life. So think about that statement. And, in both of my books, I've got his quote front and center, like at the very, very beginning of the book, just to set the stage. So yes, the answer is definitely yes.
So it's a resounding yes.
A resounding yes. Yeah, this isn't like, it's hard to stay up and down and all that stuff. No, it's not. Yes, it is up and down, but we can still be happy, even in the middle of challenges and adversities.
So why is it you think people feel so empty when we live in this period of such abundance? Now, 2,500 years ago, when Aristotle was talking, they didn't have half as much as we do now, and it still seems we're grasping for this concept of being happy, and somehow it escapes us. What do you think that's all about?
You know what they did have though 2,500 years ago, and this is of course the golden age of Greece in every aspect. They had lots of wisdom, meaning that they had time not only to observe the sky and the galaxies and astronomy and physics and the human body, and they had time to invest in wellness and happiness. So they kind of walk the talk. We live in very busy lives. We go from one thing to another. One of the best things that happened as a result of the pandemic, in the midst of all the tragedy, I know we just crossed over 4 million deaths globally and so on, and Delta variant, we're still around after almost 2 years now, is what I call the great pause, meaning that it's almost like a giant finger from the sky came down upon humanity and pressed the pause button. And what I've observed, having opportunity to talk the four corners of the earth, literally Asia, Europe, India, obviously the United States and Canada, Australia, and so on, and South Africa, the message is exactly the same. We have had time now for the first time, really in our lifetime, to seriously consider what's important in life. So what is important in life? For me personally, you got my answer early on. It's happiness is important in life. The question is how then, right? And as people pulled back, maybe work less, and which has its own issues, right? The financial and economic uncertainty, with millions and millions of people not knowing how am I going to provide for myself and my loved ones. Even in the midst of that, time to ponder and to think and to recognize that what really matters? People, connections. Harvard has done this, the longitudinal study of 80 years. It's the only study of its kind, 80-year study, where they track people from the very early on until almost at the end of their lives. And what were the conclusions, right? What matters is connectivity, to connect with people. Just before we got on the air, you said, what are your plans? What are you doing this summer? I said, well, I'm going to Greece. And you asked me how long, and I'm like 6 weeks, which is kind of unusual for Americans. 6 weeks, and I'm working there too. It's not just play. I always combine the two. But last year, I tried something for the very first time. My writing partner and best friend that you know very well, Coach Khan, issued a challenge. This is like in the middle of the pandemic. This is like in June of 2020. He goes, Elia, in a couple of years, you and I need to be location agnostic. And I'm like, what the hell is location agnostic? I've never even heard of that term. Because, work, be anywhere in the world, including Greece, obviously, we're both Greek, and be able to work and do what you enjoy the most. So I took that challenge and I left. by myself, no wife, no kids, nothing. And I went to Greece for 6 weeks to try it out of curiosity too. You know what the takeaway from that, for those 6 to 7 weeks, was the following. Number one, I didn't watch any television. No Netflix. And I'm addicted to all of these things, what I'm about to tell you. My phone time, it was done by 75% for 6 weeks. My computer time was done by 50%. So when I came back, and I've shared this with audiences, people have said, well, Dr. Elia, what did you do instead? Like, they can't wrap their minds. I said, you know what I did? I swam 2 times a day. I basked in the sun. I took the rays of the sun and the vitamins and so on. I ate healthy Mediterranean food. I ate out every night. I walked everywhere. I went to the bakery every day. It's very simple. Life became very simple. But more importantly, I connected with people, friends and family that I go back 50 years. And we talked, and we had deep conversations. We laughed a lot. And for 7 weeks, I never ate alone, meaning that I was always surrounded by people that I love and care about, and love and care about me. So that, to me, is happiness.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that connectedness is really something that we need. And, I do a lot of resilience work with companies, helping them put together programs to help build resilient workforces and so on. And that's one of the key pillars, is that ability to establish a sense of community. And, what you're talking about is really about that. It's about having that community of people that you care about, that you enjoy being with, that you spend time with, that you get to know intimately. I do think that's a really important aspect of being happy and feeling fulfilled. Now, here's something, and I kind of want to get your take on this. I have a sense that all of this social media and communications technology, some of it you referenced as you were describing, unplugging from it all.
I did.
I kind of wonder, is that hurting us in the long run? Why do people still feel empty with all of those kinds of technological capabilities? And my theory is this. I think, obviously we live in an age of heavy duty consumerism. And I think things like social media really exaggerate the haves and have nots. Meaning someone on social media will show their brand new pocketbook, or their brand new car, or their brand new vacation home. And you almost get a feeling like, oh, well, I don't have one of those. There must be something wrong. And I kind of wonder, how does that impact one's happiness? Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, you look at social media, you see all these beautiful people living these beautiful lives. And I got 25,000 followers, I got 5,000. I've reached my limit on Facebook, 5,000 friends. Well, out of those 5,000 friends, you probably know like less than 100.
Right.
I mean, they're not really friends. I have like 5 to 10 really good friends when I go to Greece, and my life is fulfilled. I don't need more than that.
Yep.
But we get into the social media and we know what our own lives look like behind the scenes, right? Behind the door. But then we measure that and we compare that to what's seen on the outside that people are posting. So obviously we don't measure up. Our lives are not as exciting, not as sexy. We don't travel as far. We don't have so many followers and friends and so on. So I think that's this false sense of happiness and so on. That's not really real. You know what is real? Real is to connect, to be a heart-to-heart center person. And happiness, Jim, right now is in such high demand across the globe as people are finally beginning to return to some kind of normalcy. We're not even close to normal. Coach Khan, I call it the next normal. We'll never go back to what it was before. Specifically in the hospitality industry. And this is not just here in the United States and Canada, but it's also in Europe. Speaking to people in positions of power, you know what they've said? First of all, the pandemic decimated that industry, obviously, right? The revenue, just to give you an idea, went from 37% on the average of what it used to be in 2019 and before. So if a hotel, for example, used to make $10 million a year, last year they made 3.7. So that's a huge loss. I don't care what industry you're in,
Hmm.
what company you're, if your revenue is down 2/3, that's devastating.
Hmm.
But what did they do? They decided to begin to look at what can we do when the economy opens up again and consumers, meaning guests, return to our hotels and our resorts and so on. And you know what they discovered? To me, it's fascinating because the discovery happened across the Atlantic, both in the United States, because I'm talking to those resorts, and in Europe, which was what? We need to get away from a resort and spa, meaning you go and get a massage, you maybe do a little hydrotherapy, you do some mindfulness and yoga and meditation and so on. Because what does the market demand right now? They're demanding more transformational offerings, and specifically happiness retreats. That's the
Mm.
market demanding that. That's not me
Mm.
saying that. Obviously, for me, this is
Mm.
great because this is my expertise. This is what I love to do. And they're saying, Elia, bring us your what I call health, happiness, and hospitality.
Hmm.
Okay, this is the program for whom? Both for their employees who suffered. The last year and a half has been
Hmm.
really rough for employees.
Hmm.
Very depressing, honestly. When nobody, when the hotel is closed, or it's at less than 50% capacity for a year and a half. It's but not just for the employees, but also for their guests. Meaning, you take your family and you go to the Caribbean somewhere. You take them to the south of France, or to a Greek island, more specifically. Which I'm going to one of those resorts in August specifically for that.
It should make
And
you happy.
no, no, exactly. And then if I'm going to bring my family, how about we spend a day or two, 3 or 4 hours a day, not all day long, enjoy the sunshine, eat the great Mediterranean food, but also learn about lifelong happiness. And
Hmm.
is happiness a choice? Yes, it is, but it's also a skill set, meaning that anybody can learn. If they do a few things, not a lot of things, but if you do a few things consistently over time, you will find happiness, guaranteed.
So let me jump in for a second. You said a couple of different things that I think are really important, and I think worth kind of diving into a little bit. And I definitely want to understand better about how one can learn the skills needed to be happy. Okay, so we'll kind of end this little part of the conversation with you talking a little bit more about that. But here's the thing: there's a whole cottage industry that seems to have emerged over the last few years about the pursuit of personal happiness, to
Yes.
the point where I wonder about the authenticity of it all, and is it real? Should we really be pursuing those goals? It seems to me that the pressure to be happy has invaded our
Mhm.
homes, our schools, our organizations, and admitting to be unhappy means you're a loser. So people walk around with an inferiority complex, maybe uh, exaggerated a bit because of social media participation, like we talked
Sure.
about a minute ago. But wow, to actually raise your hand and go, look, I'm unhappy, is almost, people will look at you funny because there's such an emphasis on trying to be happy. And again, I wonder, should it be our goal? So talk a little bit about that, and maybe you can kind of fold in some of those ideas you have about how one can learn the skills to be truly happy.
Well, you know where I stand. To me, it's the most important thing in life, our own personal happiness. But some people have, maybe a genetic predisposition. They're lighter in their countenance, they're like lighthearted. And other people are much more morose, even, or just, it's not in their personality. The good news is that regardless of what your genetics or your environment, of course, that has such a huge influence, right, in our lives, obviously.
Hmm.
Nature versus nurture, is both. In spite of all that, you can still find happiness. It might come a little bit easier for some people, but it might take a little bit more work for others. And yes, in general, I think happiness is elusive because people either don't do the work or don't know what to do. In other words, they
Okay,
don't
so tell
yeah,
me more about that, Elia.
okay.
Tell me more. What should we do if we want to work on being happy?
So you know what's funny about that, Jim? When the first book came out, The 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, and did well, became #1 bestseller. People came out and said, Dr. Elia, it's not like you said something new. It's
Yeah.
not like you recreated the wheel. They're like, It's not like you said something that Aristotle and other great leaders, from thousands of years ago, from different cultures, haven't said about
Mm,
happiness. What other seven paths? Easy. Love yourself, express gratitude, forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, which is crucial. Knowing your purpose and living your purpose in life. Um, uh, Having healthy relationships and getting rid of toxic relationships. Feeding your spiritual self, and ultimately be kind and be of service to other people.
mhm.
So those are the seven. Yeah, we've all heard of them, right? And if you look at the reviews, people specifically, we go to Amazon, it's all like 5 stars. You know why? They said, here's what we like about your book. And by the way, Jim, I've written both of those books from my heart, not as a PhD. Like the way I'm talking to you right now, simple. If you're 18 years old and you're starting your life, or you're 85 and you're still looking for something, you'll find it. What this is their feedback, not mine. What they're saying is, we know that stuff. What we like about it is at the end of every chapter, you have a couple of points for us to ponder, to think about, to meditate on, to consider, to slow down, right, and think about these things deeply. A couple of questions to answer. But more importantly, the last part of every chapter is what you call take action. Meaning what? That knowledge without application is just education. You can read the top 10 books in the world about happiness, but if you don't act upon them, you're more knowledgeable now. And I personally think even more frustrated, because now you know what it takes to be happy, but you're not any happier.
Mhm.
So in the end, what matters in life is not what you know, is what do you do with what you know?
Mm,
It's always
yes,
in the taking of the action. For
sure.
example, this is an easy example. Self-forgiveness. You and I both know, we work with people thousands for decades. We know how hard that is, right? People have a really hard time forgiving themselves. And as a result of that, it robs them from their own personal happiness.
Hmm.
So I take people through the process based on my experience as a clinical psychologist for 18 years, my first half of my career, and then as an executive coach, the last half. This is how you do it, like step by step by step. Because when you forgive yourself and you have a clean slate, you wake up every morning without what I call that invisible backpack that most of us put on.
Hmm.
Every morning before we brush our teeth, we get up, we put this backpack on, which is 100 pounds full of rocks in essence. And those rocks are symbolic of mistakes we've made, human frailties, weaknesses, resentments, anger, whatever you call it. When you forgive yourself, which to me, is the ultimate act of self-compassion, honestly, to forgive oneself, then you start every day clean slate.
Hmm. Well,
And
hey, look, I'm with you on that, and I do think that that sort of self-loathing kind of stuff is the beginning of a lot of bad behaviors and a lot of real sadness in one's life. I think you
yes,
can really drive yourself bonkers with sort of that self guilt, and the flip side of that, the self-evaluation. Okay. Now, what I'm wondering is, it seems like our obsession with ourselves being happy has created sort of a dulling effect on the sense of social responsibility. So,
agreed.
I know it makes some people happy to buy that $1,000 Gucci pocketbook,
Not for very long.
but I
Not for
wonder,
very long.
is there any social good coming from the person that invests the $1,000 in that $1,000 Gucci pocketbook? Nothing against Gucci, of course, or the people that like expensive pocketbooks, but it's an illustration, I think, of how people use the acquisition of things as sort of a band-aid to help themselves feel better. And I think it comes at a really high price, not only personally, but also socially, because of course, if I'm worrying about my next Gucci bag, I'm not worrying about, feeding the hungry. So what are your thoughts on that, Elia?
I love it, and I agree with you 100%. You can buy luxury goods, and we like to travel and stay at nice places and so on. But where's the greatest fulfillment coming from? You know where it is? When I took my family and we went up to North Dakota to an Indian reservation, a Native American reservation, and we helped build Habitat for Humanity. We
Mm,
helped build a house.
hmm.
When the kids were younger, we used to go on a monthly basis, every month, to feed the homeless here in Colorado, to be of service, in other words, to
Hmm.
help other people that are not quite as fortunate, perhaps, as we are. and to teach them that ultimately happiness, yes, self-care is important. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and that's why it's the first thing, right? Take care of ourselves physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Yes, but it's not enough to take to self-care. That's only the 50% of the equation. The other 50% is because I have been given much, I too must give back and
Mm,
to serve other people. Because that to me is the real happiness. It's a combination of the two. Obviously, my batteries have to be full in order for me to be able to love and help other people, of course. But if I only take care of myself and only take care of myself and only take care of myself and I get self-obsessed and so on, then I'm missing a big component. And that's not where true happiness comes.
hmm
Self-care is important. It's vitally important, as a matter of fact. But ultimately, it leads to connecting and helping and loving and serving other people around you. Because in the
hmm
end, we're all connected. So you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, for sure. When I was preparing for our conversation today, I was thinking about the various facets of happiness and what it's all about. And I fully agree with you that we have an obligation to the betterment of society, to the betterment of the communities that we live in, you know. And I think we've lost a bit of that, frankly, um, because we're bombarded 1,000 times a day with all these images of what success looks like, what happiness looks like. And I think we've kind of created this society that's got, an obsession with happiness at the cost of mental health. And I kind of wonder what's your take on that? I mean, it would seem to me that it leads to all kinds of things around anxiety, depression, uh, and so on, because there's this whole sort of I want to be this, I want to be that, and it's based on the messages we're receiving all day long from marketers and from the people we follow on social media and our friends and family even. So what do you think?
Well, first of all, you brought up mental health. We are at a pandemic size global mental health crisis facing humanity right now. Just according to the United Nations, and this goes back to last November. So we're talking about where they said billions of people with a B are suffering from depression, anxiety, and stress. Mind you, these are people that did not have pre-existing conditions. This is a
Yeah.
direct result of the lockdowns and the feelings of out of control, the isolation, the loneliness,
Mm,
the lack of connecting with people that we love. Hugging people, kissing people, touching
yeah.
people, all of those things. We're in deprivation mode.
Mm,
Um, so the mental health crisis is real. I want to go back to that happiness is success or success is happiness. And because that's the subtitle of the book, actually. It's kind of funny that you brought this up. And it comes from this
I
story.
did my homework,
Now, you
Elia.
did your homework.
I don't go into these conversations lightly, my friend.
But here's where that came from. Years ago, I was working with a CEO of his own company, startup company. The guy's made millions, came in for some personal issues. One day he walks in right here behind me on my couch and plops himself down. Big, large man stretches out his arm. He goes, he had just closed a multi-million dollar deal, biggest deal of his company. He sits back, he goes, and you're so happy, right? He goes, Elia, success is happiness. And he's telling me about it. He's so excited. And I'm listening to him. And at some point, I don't want to burst his bubble. And let's call him John. That wasn't his real name. I stopped and I'm like, John, I think you've got that a little backwards. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, dude, why are you here? You're here because you're about to go through your third divorce.
Mm,
Your kids from the first two marriages are not even talking to you. You're trying to salvage this relationship. You're trying to do things differently. I said, my friend, I'm glad for you. I'm proud of you for closing this big deal, but you got it backwards. I said, he goes, what do you mean? I said, happiness is success. And he got very quiet. And I said, I want you to really think about that. Now, to his credit, the end of the story is that he did do the hard work. He did mend his relationship with his adult kids, and he did have that marriage actually work out in the end. He did a lot of work. But my whole point was he thought because he closed a big deal, he closed another zero to his bank account, that success is happiness.
Yep.
You and I both know how many successful people do we know that are
Yep.
miserable
Yep.
every single day? Every
Yep.
day, there's some kind of scandal, some kind of celebrity, politician, wealthy, whatever, influencer that either they, God forbid, commit suicide, or they're in a drug rehab place, or their relationship,
Yeah.
not divorce, and all that stuff. Okay, well, you have all the fame, the money, the adulation in the world, and you're still miserable. That's not success, my friend.
Right.
Happiness is success.
I love that point, Elia. Happiness is success. Yeah. That really resonates. Let's take the last couple minutes that we've got left and talk a little bit about what we can do. Now, some of the takeaways I've got from talking with you today is, helping others and taking part in something that's sort of bigger than ourselves. It transcends our personal, self-interest is one of the steps we can take. It seems like, treating others with fairness and justice and respect. You didn't say those words exactly, but I think they underpin a lot of what we talked about. It's something, as you know, that I write about quite often, that whole thing around decency and leadership and so on, and how I feel like we've kind of lost our way a bit in that regard. In fact, my next episode will be with Harry Kramer Jr., who is the former chairman and CEO of Baxter International, health care company. It's billions of dollars in size. Great executive, and also a great professor now. He teaches at the Kellogg School. We'll talk a little bit about decency then. But what are some other things that we can do to kind of drive home and become more happy?
So a couple of things. One of them has to do with, obviously, and we all know this, gratitude. We all hear this phrase, have an attitude of gratitude. We also know that physiologically, you cannot be in a grateful state and be depressed at the same time because of the chemicals that are released in our brains. Now, gratitude is easy when everything's working out in life. That's the easiest thing in the world.
Right. Yeah.
My push to people is, and I say this, we're all graduates from the University of Adversity. Every single one of us. And the older we get, like you and I, when I start having gray hair, the higher the degree. You and I probably have like 2 PhDs in adversity, right? The key is, can you be grateful in the middle of adversity? And you definitely can. And what do I mean by that? Successful people, meaning people who are happy, because I call that part of the success, have the same human frailties, weaknesses, make the same mistakes that everybody else makes, man.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing, except that they do 3 things differently. Number one, they always take personal responsibility for their actions. Meaning, this is on me. Nobody put a gun to my head to make this decision. I own this. Which means they don't play the victim, right? So that's number one. Number two, they learn from their mistakes. And just like the great President Nelson Mandela said, either you win in life or you learn. There's no losing, right? They learn. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And number three, which I think is even personally more important, they have the ability to let it go. Meaning they don't carry something from last year to this year, or from last month to this month, or even a mistake they made yesterday into today. They own it. They take responsibility for it. They learn, and then they let it go by forgiving themselves. And those 3 things, if you do them consistently, will lead you to a great and successful life. Now, having said all of that stuff about kindness, forgiveness, gratitude, and so on, self-care, you can do all of those things. But, and this is a big asterisk right here, if you surround yourself with toxic people, it's really very hard to maintain your happiness. I got to be honest.
Yep.
And I personally made a decision like 15 years ago. I said, I'm going to eliminate any toxic relationships I have in my life. And I don't have any. And people said, are you serious? Like, come on, be honest. Like, behind that, you don't have anybody in your extended family or friend? I'm like, no, I don't. And they're like, Elia, how are you doing that? I said, very simple. I try to show up. I'm not perfect, obviously, but I try to show up and treat people with love, kindness, and respect.
Yep.
As a result of that, I expect them to treat me with love, kindness, and respect.
Yep. Yep.
And they're like, well, how can you say stuff like that? I'm like, why? Jim, if I show up, if I'm loving, kind, and respectful to you, I have every right to expect that you do the same for me in return, period.
Right.
And if you don't,
I think, Elia, we're we're going to say goodbye here. We'll continue the conversation on LinkedIn, but I love that sentiment. I think that's a great way to end today's conversation. I really thank you for your time and your great wisdom today and sharing that with the audience. And I look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Thank you, Jim. This has been wonderful. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
It's been great. Thank you, Elia.
You bet.